Welcome back, everyone, to another edition of the Let'sRun.com Track Talk podcast. I hope you're excited to be here because I am as well. This is going to be a blowout podcast. So much to talk about. Incredible Millrose Games is in the books, and America has a new distance star in Elle. Purrier, we're going to get you ready for this week's USA Indoor Championships, where she'll be doubling. So much other stuff to talk about. Incredible reporting coming out of Canada. Top coach has gone down. Let's Run. We would not be having a podcast if we didn't talk about the Vaporflies. We're going to have a 15-minute interview with Hoka Aggies head coach Joe Rubio. That and much, much more. Maybe we said last week we promised Iowa caucuses. Maybe we'll talk about that. But John's got an Oscars rant. I promise you we'll get to that. And most importantly of all, the baby moon is over. Weldon Johnson, my co-founder, is back from the baby moon. But this is Let'sRun.com co-founder Robert Johnson. And if you want to reach us, folks, unlike Twitter, unlike Facebook, just pick up the phone. 844-LET'S-RUN, 844-538-7786 is how you reach us. And this week's podcast is brought to you by Hoka. They are sponsoring a month-long exploration of the marathon trials. There's been some crazy stuff on there, some really great profiles we've had in the last few days, and that's going to be continuing. Have you read about Swanjit Boyle? The Indian American who was cut from his high school team, from his college team twice, is now at the trials. Or how about the cancer researcher that we have on there today, Liza Reichert? Incredible stuff.
Now, Robert, are we going to let Weldon back on the podcast? I think we did the last two without him. They both seem to be pretty good. You got space for your rants and for your shoe takes. Is he going to come back on? What do you think?
I personally would like to get rid of him. I've been living in his shadow for my entire life. I talked to a prominent author last week. Running with the Buffalo's author Chris Leary said the podcast is really tightening up. And I think it's because we only have two people to talk about, John. Plus, breaking news. I need my breaking news music. Unfortunately, I don't have it ready, queued up on my phone. Folks, big news. You're listening to the number 2 ranked podcast, running podcast in Singapore.
First Singapore, next the world. All right, Weldon, what do you think? Should we let you back on the show?
Well, I'm sure ratings are down. Haven't checked the numbers. But I listened last week, and it was pretty good. I enjoyed it. On the baby moon. You guys had some good stuff, good analysis. I thought John's take on the baby moon was pretty interesting, that we should go on the baby moon before there's even a baby or a pregnancy. I'm not sure. That's called a vacation, John. But what a week for running. I mean, I picked the week to go away. Millrose Games held on my track. It's my indoor track, the Armory, where I used to live. I live probably 2 miles from the Armory. I go away for a weekend, miss a Millrose, and I miss 1, 2, 3 American records. And it was pretty crazy, the whole Millrose thing. Because I expected a couple American records. I checked the 800. Here's how I saw Millrose results. I was in Paris. I pull up the 800. I see Donavan Brazier breaks the American record. I'm just kind of like, ho-hum. Then I realized the meet was still on. So don't ask me how. I pulled up the meet on my phone, got it working through a VPN, NBC Gold. The Wanamaker mile was going, men's mile. Ho-hum. Chris O'Hare, easy victory. And then I was like, okay, I need to look for some more results. I checked the forums. I saw Nico Young had the record. I checked the women's 800. I'm like, oh, that's supposed to be good. Ajay Wilson, American record. I'm like, ho-hum. Kind of expected. And then I start texting you guys, and you're like, black page for Elle Purrier, or what? And I'm like, what are they talking about? A black page for what? And I checked the women's mile record, and I almost fell out of my chair. I mean, we have a new American star, ladies and gentlemen. That was out of nowhere. Elle Purrier, I'm converting. 4:16 mile? That's nuts.
4:16.85. It took down the longest standing American record on the books on the women's side. Mary Decker Slaney, 1982 is how long that record had stood since. And now it's gone. It's also the second fastest mile ever indoors by anyone from any country. It's the second fastest mile by an American, indoors or outdoors. Crazy stuff. And this is a woman, remember, she was running the steeple until, her last couple of years in college. She switched over. That's pulling the Jenny Simpson right there. Yeah, absolutely outstanding run. And she beat, it's not like she beat a bunch of spares, as Weldon would say. Look at the people she beat in this. World Championship medalist Constance Klosterhalfen, 4:17 for second. That's a German record. Gemma Ricci, who last week just ran 1:57 for 800, which is the fastest indoor 800 since 2006. She got third in a British record of 4:17, and then Gabriella Debus-Stafford, who is a 3:56 1500 woman, she got fourth in 4:19.73. Nikki Hiltz, World Championship finalist, blown away. She was fifth place in 4:24, but she was 8 seconds behind Elle Purrier. I mean, just an incredible run for a woman who grew up in a farm in Vermont.
I was checking YouTube comments and Twitter and stuff. People were talking about her milking cows. Doesn't get much better than that. But Spares, John, this might be it's the greatest women's mile ever indoors, right? I mean, there was 3 national records behind her. This was far from Spares. This was super competitive, and I think that's why, well, I don't know. I've still only seen the last quarter of the race, so you guys can tell me, but I think the competition, that's what spurred things to such a great time. I mean, I'm sure the pacing was really good as well.
It wasn't the competition, it was Coco. It was Constance Klosterhalfen. She knew the one way she was going to win this race is basically what she did last year when she blew everyone away. Remember, last year, she raced some good women and just totally smoked them and ran 4:19. It wasn't even close over the second half. This one, Klosterhalfen ran 2 seconds faster than she did in 2019, and she ended up getting out-kicked. She ran a really great race as well. If Purrier hadn't out-kicked her, Klosterhalfen, well, we'd still probably be talking about Purrier because it's a breakout run. But really good stuff from Klosterhalfen. And just for some context for how great this was, Danny Jones of Colorado runs 4:27 for 7th place. That's a collegian. It's one of the fastest collegiate indoor miles ever, 4:27.88. And she just got rolled. She lost by over 10 seconds. I saw Jones walking off the track. I'm like, man, she didn't do that well. I'm like, wait a minute. She just ran 4:27. It's just, that gets distorted because the winning time was 4:16. It was just an incredible, incredible race.
John, seems like you're doing revisionist history. Have you issued a formal apology to Ms. Purrier? Last week on this very podcast, you listed the potential winners. She was not mentioned as one of them. Please apologize to Let's Run Nation. No, everyone got that wrong. But, what also made it special was the fact that she wins. If she doesn't win the race, it's just not nearly as cool. I knew they were running fast on the last lap. She was in 4th, and then coming into the last turn, I'm like, wait, she's moving up. And then she's going to get this. So amazing, fast time and the victory. But John, you talked about Coco. I mean, she deserves huge props. She was basically the rabbit. She kept this pace going. Now, according to Craig Mosbeck, at least on the telecast, this is not what her coach wanted him, what the coach wanted her to do. He wanted her to practice kicking. So thank God she didn't, because then we wouldn't be talking about this mile if it was a sit and kick race. So it may have been stupid for her long-term development, but thank you, Coco.
Well, I think the debate now with Purrier, so we've got a showdown with Shelby Houlihan this weekend in Albuquerque at USA's. They're both entered in both the 15 and 3K. Houlihan has said she intends to run both. 3K is first on Friday. Purrier, we don't know for sure what she's doing, but at least one of those races she'll run. What I'm interested, though, moving forward to outdoors, what event should Elle Purrier focus on? Last year, she runs the 5,000 meters at the World Championships. She runs a couple of PR. She runs a PR in the final of 14:58. That places her 11th in Doha.
Can I just cut you off? This is like the dumbest conversation ever. What event is she going to run? 1,500. There's just no debate here, John. Like, why would she run the 5K? 14:58 is so far from world class. You have to be able to run 14:20 to be world class. She just showed she's world class in the 1,500, has medal potential. So, unless you're going to tell me she's a 14:30 5K woman, which no American has ever been so far, why would she run the 5K? She doesn't even... I would say her powerful build is more of a 1,500 runner. She's like Shelby Houlihan. Run the 1,500. Do the 5K as a backup. Like, what are we talking about here? Like, this is just like, move them up in distance?
No. I have a method to my madness. Now, I acknowledge.
Are you vouching for the 5K?
I'm arguing for the 5K. Initially, I was like you, Weldon. I spoke to some of my Irish buddies. I spoke to Carl Dennehy and Phelan Kelly. I think Carl basically won me to his side, and I'll give you his argument in a minute. But first of all, the women's 5,000 is essentially a wasteland for the U.S. They've never had any success in it, never medaled in the Olympics or Worlds in that event. But let me run off. Here are the results from the World Championship 1,500-meter final last year in Doha. 1. Sifan Hassan, 3:51. 2, Faith Kipyegon, 354. 3, Gudolf Sagai, 354. 4, Shelby Houlihan, 354. 5, Laura Muir, 355. 6, Gabrielle Debus Stafford, 356. Shelby Houlihan ran over a second faster than any American has ever run and did not even medal at the World Championships last year. Weldon. This event, comparatively, is so much stronger than the 5,000. You're saying, like, she essentially has to be in 354 shape to medal at the Olympics. I'm just not convinced that she can do that. She can drop off 3 seconds after already dropping off a massive amount.
John's got a point here in the sense of his argument seems to be the 1,500 stacked. But John, look, Americans in the 5,000 are basically 20 seconds. I would normally say 20 seconds away from medaling. But, I mean, when we started this conversation, I thought John has lost it. He should be fired from Let'sRun.com. Well, then, here's one thing I'm thinking about as I'm doing the research. I don't like this. I want her in the 1,500. But do you know who medaled in the 5,000 this year?
Constance
Hoka.
effing Klosterhalfen, who she just outkicked in a 1,500.
Now, the point is, though, the only reason, John, she medaled was because the IAAF, World Athletics, the Olympics, these people are so stupid. They can't figure out a way to make the schedule so that you can do the 1,500 and 5,000 double. I mean, to me, Klosterhalfen is, well, she did run 14:26. First of all, Purrier, John, is miles away from running 14:26. She's nowhere close to that.
Yeah, but I think she can run faster than 14:58 because I think she just showed she's fitter than she was last year. She's been doing 5K oriented training. If she can get into the 1440s and it's a little slower at World.
No. If she can get in the 1440s, she's completely uncompetitive in that event. You need to get down in the 1420s. She's not capable of doing that. She'll get a balloon stored away. Klosterhalfen has run 14:26. She medaled. Did she get a bronze? The only reason she medaled, though, was because the other people didn't do this event because you couldn't double. I mean, you don't think Letzinet Gade can run a 14:20? Of course she can. She's run 14:20. She just didn't run it at Worlds. So, I mean, she's not going to beat Gade if she doubles back. She's not going to beat Hassan if Hassan's in there.
Well, guess what, Robert? The 5K double impossible at the Olympics this year. The 1,500 final, I think one of the prelims is on the same day. They have a race. You have to race both events on the same day. It's not doable.
Okay, well, it is doable. You could run two on the same day. You're saying it's not doable?
No. You that'd be coaching malpractice to ask them to run a heats and final in the same day at the Olympics, Robert. That's moronic.
1,500 prelim in the morning and a 5,000 final at night. I think you could do that. But anyways, let's go on this. World Athletics, what are you doing? What is your job? How hard is it to get the 1,500 and 5,000 on the same day? Double doable at the same Worlds. I don't like it how some of these events, it's always generally, particularly the 5,000. The best 5,000 people don't end up in the race half the time. Haile Gebrselassie never did the 5,000 at the Olympics. I mean, we need the best people in the 5,000. I don't want her running the 5,000, John, out of the hope that four of the top 7 people won't show up and then she'll sneak a bronze medal.
Right. If she becomes a 14:30 5K runner, let's have this conversation. And if she's not, like, what's the point? She could run it, okay, let's say Worlds is weak and she finishes, like, 5th place. Never a factor. I would much rather be in the 1,500 with thinking going in, like, I'm a 356 girl. I got a shot at a medal. I could conceivably win this thing, ignoring Hassan. Whatever event Hassan wins, nobody's going to beat if she's at her best. So, and the prestige of the 1,500. I guess after the if you get a medal, I guess nobody cares what event your medal was. You're an Olympic medalist. But I think it's going to be almost impossible to pass up the 1,500. I wonder what the double is like at USA's because
Double's very doable. 1,500 first. Okay,
then she'll do both of the trials. There's no question about that because, like Chris Slinsky, he's not an Olympian, right? I mean, you got to make sure you get on an Olympic team.
Yeah, that's right. But no, here's the other point that Carl raised to me, and I agree with him. I don't think Purrier has proven that she has the closing speed to be a championship 5K medalist on the global stage. What did she close this mile in? It was 62:16 for her last quarter. I don't know. It's weird, these splits. They're giving us quarter mile splits. She doesn't seem like a Houlihan who is an 800 type who has that real top end speed. I mean, kicking against Houlihan and Hassan, who's a 156 woman, and Kipyegon. I mean, we've seen it the last couple of years in Doha. Jenny Simpson, I view like Purrier is pretty similar to Jenny Simpson. They were in the same fitness last year. Jenny Simpson wasn't even competitive in that 1500 because she didn't have the speed to run she didn't have the overall strength to run 354. And I don't think she had the closing speed, in a tactical race against those women either. I mean, her tactics, yes, would be great, but I haven't seen it from Elle Purrier. Her 800 PR is 8:203. Can she please show that she can close in a championship 1500?
But John, you think she's got the closing speed in the 5K?
In a slow race, yes, because she just outkicked a woman who medaled last year.
In a 1500.
Yeah, but she still outkicked her. She has better closing speed. You could argue she could outkick Coco, and if she has to build up her endurance. I don't think she's going to medal in either event, but I'd love to see her in the 5K, and I think she, if she can build up her strength.
This is laughable, John. John, this is laughable. She can't outkick Coco in a 14:28 race because she can't.
No, that's not what I'm saying. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying that. But you think, all right? You think she's
okay, John?
Give me a scenario. She medals in the Olympic 1500. What kind of race is she going to do that in?
John, let's change this. How we're looking at this real quick. Let's just use. I don't know. Men. Women aren't going to like this. Give me a 5K guy. Drew Hunter. Drew Hunter's more of a 5K guy. He's pretty good at 15.2. Drop him down to the 1500, and some 1500 guy outkicks him. I don't know, somebody like Eric Avila. So 1500 guy outkicks Drew Hunter at the mile, wins some impressive race. You're telling me now that like Eric Avila, when you move him up to the 5K, is going to beat Drew Hunter and outkick him at Worlds in a fast? No.
Not a fast race, but you're assuming it's a fast race. You're also assuming that Avila is going to get top 3 in the 1500, which he's probably not. And, well, then you didn't answer my question. What kind of race is Elle Purrier going to medal in at the Olympics? Because I don't see that she has the top end speed, and I don't think she can run 354 if it goes like what Safan Hassan did last year.
John, let me interrupt. I'll answer the question for them. This is easy. In any normal 1500 race at Worlds, when you're in 357 shape, that generally medals. You go out and run 357 and you medal.
No. If you run 357 at Worlds, you are probably in much better than 357 shape, Robert. Running 357 at Worlds is incredibly difficult to do. That's why it doesn't happen every year.
Well, right. Normally, if you're in 357 shape, you medal. Please tell me in what world, in what type of race, does a 1458 5,000 meter runner medal ever in Worlds in any type of race? The idea, John, you're
Emily Infeld medaled at the 2015 World Championships in 10K, Robert.
Yes, in a fluke year when no one runs it. When no one runs it. So she should run an event that she's really not that good at and just hope that the Africans don't bother to run it because they're all in the marathon making roads.
The schedule is not conducive to doubling for the 1500.
So again, let's run an event and hope that none of the Africans run because they'd rather run the Falmouth road race and pick up $7,000 instead of running the Olympics and medaling. I mean, John, please. She's totally uncompetitive in the 5,000. Get back to me when she breaks 14:30. Then we can have her run the 5,000.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you. John, you're on suspension for the rest of the podcast, maybe for the week, maybe for the month for the show.
I know. Well,
we've already bought his ticket to the trials. I guess he can go to the trials. He'll probably join one of these unions, these writers' unions that exist.
But the joke's on you because we just got 10 minutes of great content by me taking up an opposing position to you guys, which I kind of happen to believe in. I'm sorry, she hasn't proven that she has the speed yet.
So this is good. John, there's no way John sincerely held that belief. I think this is turning into like Stephen A or something where somebody takes a belief they don't believe just to like get ranting.
No, I mean, John just replaced himself. He told us who we should hire. He was just like, well, Cathal told me this. Cathal Dennehy, Irish journalist. We're just going to fire John and hire Cathal.
He's the one who inceptioned this idea.
Well, I know, but at least we're getting an original idea, not one that you stole from somebody else.
Exactly.
It's not stealing if I credit them.
People say we need more diversity on the podcast. And John is half American. We need less Americans. That'll be our inclusion for diversity. We'll first go for an Irish person.
That's not how the woke generation will see it. Well, then they'll see that we switched out one white guy for an even older white guy, and they'll be all pissed about it.
Okay, can we turn to another event at Millrose?
There were other events at Millrose, really?
I then was going through my phone. Oh no! Then you guys did the splash page, and I checked out the splash page, and you've got the finish of the men's 800 meters. OMG. For the first time ever, I was like, holy shit, he could break the world record. I totally viewed the American record by Donavan Brazier completely differently. He ran 144 and he went out in 53. Is that right?
That's correct. 53.04. I mean, let's just be honest here.
Closed in 24, the final 200?
Donavan Brazier was, pardon my French, fucking around for the last 600, really. And that was on purpose. I actually think it was like Robert said in the week that was, it was great coaching by Pete Julian telling him, look, get in a bad position, try to work your way out of it. This is what indoors is for. He understands that it's all about the Olympics. But he's screwing around, and then he just makes this one move, and he's not up against scrubs here either. Bryce Hopple was 4th in the World Championships last year. He's having a great indoor season himself. He's just been overshadowed. He runs an indoor PB of 145.7, which is pretty great, this time of year. Brazier makes him look like he's running in quicksand. I mean, 24.89 for the last lap indoors. And the way he unfolds his stride and just pumps those arms, it is a sight to behold. It's absolutely magnificent. Really amazing stuff from Brazier.
Yeah, it was just a crazy race, and I thought it was really impressive that it's Coach Pete Julian told him, "We want you to learn how to run in a pack. Go out in the pack. Don't front run." Well, if you got that much left at the end of the race, it doesn't really matter where you are. I was so shocked when I just saw that's how he got the record. I mean, he just crushed everyone. Like Bryce Hopple looked like he's running slow, and he ran a pretty good race. And I guess, should we get our Alberto segment in now? I mean, I guess Alberto wasn't his coach, but Alberto who? Do we even need Alberto anymore? Pete seems to be doing a really good job. I thought it was interesting that Pete, told Donavan to have this different outlook, try this different race.
Well, remember, this isn't new. They were trying this in Boston last year as well, indoors. Like, they used the indoor season to really drill down on tactics. And I think, that's exactly what, as an 800 runner, it's exactly what you should be doing. That's what Bryce Hopple, this is why coming through the NCAA system, I know that Brazier didn't do that. He only ran 1 year in the NCAA, but Hopple, last year in Kansas, he got all this experience racing and winning in so many different ways, and that really helped, as make the transition to the professional ranks smoothly, because you just get so much experience running in different positions and running on different tracks and that sort of thing. I think it's really helpful.
So, John, what was Brazier's? How were him and Purrier after the race? I didn't listen to what they said, but sort of what was their mood? Was Purrier in shock?
Purrier was shocked. She was just sort of still taking time to process it. She didn't even know what the American record was beforehand. She wasn't even on her mind. And I was asking her, well, does this change about what you think about the 1500 and 5K? She's like, I just ran the race. I'm still deciding. But I think she knew she was pretty fit. I don't think she knew she was that fit, and getting that win, it was pretty crazy for her. Brazier, it was more of he was in a good mood, and he was just, so he tries to navigate sort of the line of being humble with also knowing how good he is. And yeah, he was just Pete told me to get in a bad position in practice and practice tactics. He was pretty happy with how it went. And then that last lap, I was like, dude, but 24.8, that last 200, he's like, well, yeah, the first 3 laps were slow, so I'm not really surprised I can close that fast. It's I don't know, running in any 800, closing in 24.8, I don't care how fast those first 3 laps were, that's still pretty tough to do indoors. It was just phenomenal.
All right, John, what I want to know about Millrose is who got the biggest ovations? Who are the biggest stars? Pre-race, when they introduced the runners, which distance stars did you view as getting the largest ovations? Because you said something to me offline that was interesting.
Yeah, the 2 people who really stood out to me were not a distance runner. Allyson Felix. She's been around the sport forever. People went crazy for her in the 60. And Donavan Brazier. And there's something about just when you were introduced before a race and you have the name world champion next to your name, that is different for fans. They're like, oh my God, this is the best guy in the entire world in this event. And he's a growing star. And it's interesting. Phelan Kelly, the Irish coach who I was speaking about earlier, I spent some time with him, and he was talking to, I think they'd brought there was a 12-year-old Irish, I think it was an Irish girl, or maybe 6, I don't know. She was pretty young. She'd come over to watch the meet, and they were asking her who she was most excited to see and who she really wanted to meet, and she said Donavan Brazier. And I don't know if it was before or after the race, probably after with how amazingly he ran. But this guy, he's one of the most popular distance runners in America right now. And you could tell the world title obviously helps, but also just the way he runs. He's always, pretty happy and smiling after these races and interviews and mixed zones. He's a pretty personable kid he used to, sometimes when he was younger and he had some failures at the, professional level his first year or two, he could get a little upset after those races, but I think he's matured, and he's also just hasn't had many races gone badly, and he's usually in a good mood. He's pretty talkative in the mix zone. I think he's pretty much the total package in terms of what you want from an American distance star.
Enough Millrose talk, guys. Let's preview this weekend's USA Indoor Championships. It's been a good couple weeks for Let's Run. A lot's been going on, a lot to talk about. Plus, we've been saving a ton of money. With the cancellation of World Indoors, I made the executive decision not to send anyone to USA's, which may be a mistake, actually, because there's some good fields now. But since it doesn't mean anything, Albuquerque is so expensive, too. I decided we're not going there. I did send John a little $200 cash to have some fun on Saturday night in New York. John, hope you didn't embarrass yourself or anything like that. But
you haven't seen the police logs yet, then? I guess that's a good thing.
I'm looking at the document that we used to sort of outline the show. It's got the USA previews. I don't see Brazier's name on there. Hey, we just spent a half hour praising him, and now we're going to have to rip him for skipping USA.
Robert, I have some bad news. He's not running the U.S. Championships.
This is a joke. Why not? I guess I'm not bothering to go, but hey, he's a professional athlete.
He said after the race, I asked him if he was running. He's like, well, if I do a workout after Millrose, then I'm not going to run USA's. And if I don't do a workout, I'll run USA's, which sounded like a kind of a silly way to determine it. I don't know. Yeah, it's kind of a bummer. I mean, I think we know what would happen. He's going to win the race. I'm more curious just like how close could he get to the world record. But the one silver lining from that is that the 800 will now be more interesting with Hopple versus Isaiah Harris, because they were pretty close at Millrose. That I think they're fairly close in ability right now. But yeah, it's a bummer not to see Brazier at USA's.
John, I beg to differ. A race without Donavan Brazier isn't more interesting. The race obviously would be more interesting if he was in it. But
fair, that's a fair point.
The who might win is more in doubt now.
Yeah.
But Robert wanted to skip off Millrose. Someone who will be competing at USA's did set an American record at Millrose, and that's Ajay Wilson. We just sort of take her for granted. And granted, she did run faster, 2 years ago at Millrose? 3 years ago. When she ate tainted beef afterwards and got a drug suspension. Or was it a suspension or just her result?
That result was annulled. She wasn't banned.
So, Ajay Wilson, we just sort of take it for granted. But I wasn't, she had only run one other 800 this year and hadn't run that fast in it and broken two. To come out and break an American record, I thought that was good. And she's taking on her teammate and World Championship silver medalist, Raven Rogers, in the 800. So, I mean, I think this, and Hannah Green. So this is the top matchup at USA's, I think.
No. Houlihan versus Purrier.
Yeah, I'm taking it back, actually.
My take about Purrier, if she comes out and outkicks Shelby Houlihan twice in 2 days at the USA's, that might just win me over to Team 15. That probably proves she has the closing speed, though I'm not sure what kind of shape Houlihan's in right now.
Yeah, should we just cancel that whole segment we just had on Purrier's kick and just see how she does versus Houlihan this week? And
that's probably a good idea.
Okay, we'll take back everything we said. If Houlihan gets outkicked by Purrier, I mean, this is great that they're rating the...
But, well, actually, let's remember this, though. Colleen Quigley outkicked Shelby Houlihan last year at USA's to win the mile title, and I don't think anyone would argue that Quigley should move to the 1500.
Whoa. Guys, let me get in here. With three people on the podcast, we got to get rid of one of you. People want to hear Rojo. Let me get some words in here. First of all, while I'm most excited about Raven Rogers, but seeing Elle Purrier versus Shelby Houlihan and the international stage, a bigger matchup in terms of accomplishments is going to be Raven Rogers versus AJ Wilson. Raven last week, I think it's smart. I think Derrick Thompson has had them not racing in the same meets on purpose. Raven ran at Camel City on the flat track. She only beat Canada's Lindsay Butterworth by 0.1 of a second. It is a flat track, 203.15 to 203.25. So I'm obviously going to go with AJ here in this matchup. But, I think that Rogers, Wilson, Hannah Green, from a world standpoint, that's probably slightly higher than the women's 1500.
Well, Robert, you've neglected to mention there, we have an American record holder and reigning United States champion in the women's 800. Do you remember who it is?
A Thing Moo.
Thing Mo. Yeah, she's entered in the 800 as well.
She also raced Camel City last weekend, was third in 2:04.08. So, I mean, I'm not into hyping teenage female phenoms until they PR at their late teens. So I don't want to get too excited about her. But let's go through USA's event by event. 800, Hopple versus Harris. Plus, don't forget, Drew Wendell, former World Indoor silver medalist. I think that Hopple has clearly established himself as the guy to beat there, because we're not going to have in that event is, it's interesting to me, we've got Clayton Murphy. He's running the 1500. So he ran the 800 at Camel City last week, and actually he did the 800 and mile, won the 800 first, and destroying Craig Ingles, who will be in the 1500 at USA's. So in the 1500 at USA's, we're going to have Clayton Murphy, Craig Ingles, Josh Thompson, and then the wild card, Willie Fink. He ran at Eastern Michigan, right? He's now running for the District Track Club. What did he do last weekend at Camel City on the flat track? Took down Edward Chesrick. Now, Chesrick's pro career is not going as many of us would have expected, I don't think, but he ran fast in Hawaii in December. He had run pretty well in the New Balance Indoor Grand Prix 3000. Shocking to me that he loses to Fink. Interesting to see, can Fink mix it up with these big boys? But John, of those people, who do you like? I think the case can be made for all of them. Thompson, Ingles, Murphy, or Fink. Who's your pick?
Josh Thompson. I really liked what I saw from him outdoors at USA's, and I guess that's silly to say considering Craig Engels beat him in that race pretty handily. But Engels, to me, hasn't looked terrific indoors so far. You know, he wasn't very competitive in that 800 at Camel City. I think Thompson, I liked how he looked at BU a couple weeks ago. I do think it's either him, and Murphy bounced back very well at Camel City. I think he looked a lot better than he did in Boston. So I think it's one of those three, Engels, Thompson, or Murphy. I'm going to put my chips on Josh Thompson, though. Does anyone dare to disagree?
I just don't think there's a lot of concern about who's going to win the men's 1500 at USA Indoors this year. We got bigger fish to worry about, John.
I mean, it's the meet this weekend. You just saying, "Oh, I don't care who wins because it's not the Olympics." I mean, it's a national championship. There's some pretty good guys. You're just going to forget about it because it's not the Olympic Games.
Yeah, it's true. Would they rather have us looking forward or discussing what happened last week? I guess a lot of times, a lot of it's about the anticipation of this week's games. I just don't see Josh Thompson winning. I don't know. Someone else will beat him.
Okay, so you're taking the field over Josh Thompson.
He's never won a USA's, right?
No.
Yeah, so he's not winning.
Craig Engels hadn't won a USA. All right, the new rule. No one who has won, if you haven't won USA's before, you can never win USA's moving forward. Craig Engels, I don't know how he did it last year at USA Indoors because he'd never won USA's before. But
to me, this is a very interesting race. I think Clayton Murphy has a decision he needs to make. What is he going to do at the trials? I guess he could probably do the 8 and 15 double at the trials. John, have we looked at the schedule? But, if he... I still think Murphy should be running the 800 at Worlds. I think that's his best bet to be a player on the world scene. But I actually think he's going to be doing himself a disservice. If he wins this race this weekend in the 1500, he may think, I should do the 1500. So unless the double is doable at the USA Outdoor Championships, he's sort of being caught in between here.
Good point. I'm so sick of Clayton Murphy. Everybody's saying he should run the 15. People should move up. John wants Purrier running the 5K, probably wants Murphy running the 1500. The 800 is his event. Until he's no longer competitive in it, he should be running the 800 in the international stage. The guy has an Olympic medal. He has strength, which helps him in the rounds, but he's done nothing to show that he's a world-class 1500-meter runner. So I kind of agree with Robert. If he wins this, it might make him think, I'm a 1500-meter runner, but I still hope he's focusing on the 800. I don't know what the double's like at USA's, but I think internationally the best chances is still the 8 for him.
No, I agree. Remember, he ran very well on the circuit last year. He made the final. He had a stinker in the World Championship final, but that happens. And 1500, I think Clayton, you guys aren't giving him enough credit. He knows he's been sort of this tweener type for his whole career. I don't think just one race against some guys in middle of February, is going to convince him, I need to be running the 1500. I think he'll probably, 800 is the best bet, and I think he'll probably plan to stay there. moving forward. All right, let's look. We looked at the 1500. We looked at the 800s. Women's 1500. Well, I guess let's start with women's 3K because this one's first. Houlihan, Purrier. What do you guys think? And could someone else drop in and contend? You know, we also in that race have Colleen Quigley. We have Courtney Frerichs. We've got Carissa Schweizer, Ali Ostrander, who won the 3K at Millrose. Is it a 2-horse race? How do you guys see this one playing out?
I don't know what Houlihan's done this year indoors, but without thinking about it, Houlihan wins. Without even looking up those numbers, I'm still picking her. I'm still picking her. Tell me what she's run this year. I'm still picking her.
She did a double at Washington. She ran 2:01 for the 800 and 4:23 for the mile. She's a 14:30 something 5,000 meter runner. I think John's right. I think Weldon's right. I think she wins the 3,000 if they both show up there.
Which is first?
The one.
Okay, that's why we're talking about it. That's Friday.
The one caveat I had over here is, even if she doesn't win, that doesn't mean she's not a better runner than Purrier. Remember, Colleen Quigley, as John said earlier in this podcast, beat her last year at USA's in a shocking upset in the mile. So, I just...
Yeah, I know it's a national championship, but I'm not going to render lasting judgments on people based on what they do on February 14th.
And you guys did mention one name, John, Ali Ostrander. Looking at the Millrose results, that was another thing that surprised me. I'm very surprised she won a Pro 3000. I thought that was a very big win for her. I mean, it was a PR. I don't know what her OPR was, but she's got to show that she can compete at the pro level. Granted, she did make the World Championship team last year, but she kind of snuck in that in the steeple. So sneaking on a U.S. team and being a competitor at the top of the U.S. are different things. So it'd be interesting to see what she does in this race.
And then we've also got the 1500, which is essentially going to have pretty much the same cast of characters. Houlihan, Purrier, Schweizer, and Quigley are all set to double back at the moment. They could scratch out of there. Shannon Osika's in there, Rachel Schneider. Are we just saying whoever wins the 3K is going to win the 1500? Because that didn't happen last year, but I feel like it probably will happen this year.
Is Quigley just in the mile?
No, she's double entered.
And there's no Jenny Simpson, correct?
Correct.
So, well, first of all, I think we're sleeping on Colleen Quigley here. It wouldn't shock me at all if she beats Elle Purrier once or twice this weekend. She's run 8:44 for 3,000 this year. That's pretty good. So, Weldon talked about Ostrander. The time wasn't that fast. It was 8:48. It was basically a college field that she beat in Millrose. I'm not saying... I was pleased that she won. It was a good step forward. But get back to me when she gets to the level of Colleen Quigley. So it's just really interesting to see these women race each other this week, and I can't wait to see the outcome.
All right, final distance event. Men's 3,000. Top entrants, Paul Chelimo, the Olympic silver medalist, Hillary Bohr, Ryan Hill, Willie Fink. I actually am interested. This is going to be a good test for Willie Fink against these guys because, Chelimo and Hill both have global medals. Bohr is pretty legit in the steeple. I mean, I think it has to be Chelimo. He has to be favored in this race. He usually wins this race at USA's, but Ryan Hill and Hillary Bohr aren't bad either.
Are you joking, John? Are you absolutely joking?
What do you mean? I said Paul Chelimo is going to win the race. He's
an Olympic medalist. He ran 750 on a flat track last week, and he's going to dominate this race. Unless, where's my boy Anthony Reichert? Where's the guy that I bet, I'm on record saying will be on the Olympic team? He's won the USA Cross Country Championships. Why isn't he in this race to make you scared, John? Because you'll be paying me money at the Olympic trials soon.
Well, Robert, I have news for you. He is in this race. I just didn't include him because I didn't think he was as notable as some of these other guys. He's run 4:10 and 7:58 this year, 4:10 mile and 7:58 3K this year. So striking fear into the hearts of everyone. Clearly, he has to be mentioned with performances like a 4:10 mile. Like,
he's the USA Cross Country champion. He's a 4-time steeplechase champion. This guy just got citizenship. You're sleeping on him. This is disrespectful. You disrespect this guy like you disrespect Kellen Taylor in the women's marathon. It's embarrassing. You have your biases. You're supposed to be an unbiased journalist. And this is ridiculous. You're mentioning Willie Fink over Anthony Reichert? No. Wow. If Reichert wins this race, I'm going to be so
Willie
mad.
Fink ran 3:59 to beat Edward Cheserek on a flat track. Anthony Rotich ran 4:10 on a bank track. I mean, open your eyes, Robert. You're saying I have these biases and I dislike these runners. I mean, I think you're too much in the tank for Anthony Rotich. Weldon, break this tie.
Wait, what is Rotich running indoors this year?
He's run 4:10 and 7:58.
Were any of those wins? 4:10 is pretty bad.
And he won the USA Cross.
They were both wins. They were at the same meet. One was the 7:58 was on January 10th, and the 4:10 was on January 11th. So that was pretty early in the indoor season. I'll give.
Fink's more of a miler. Why is he running the 3K? He's gonna get beat. I agree with Robert. Anthony Rotich, baby.
Hold on. Well then, please explain to me why you think Willie Fink is more of a miler. You don't know anything about Willie Fink. He won a mile, but why is that?
He just won a mile. Exactly. I never heard of the guy. I'm confusing him with Woody Kincaid. I mean, it's like Woody and Willie. I'm like, yeah, isn't that the guy? And then I'm like, oh no, that was Woody Kincaid. So until he pulls a Woody Kincaid, he's more of a miler because the only thing I've heard him do is win a mile. So you think he's going to beat a steeplechase guy to 3K? No. At altitude? No way. Actually, the more I think about it, yeah, I totally got Robert's back on this.
Well, no, I'm not saying Fink will beat Rotich, but I will say, because also at altitude, that's a good point. But
wait, you just argued like I was an idiot. You are saying it.
I argued you were an idiot because you're proclaiming that this guy is a miler when you know nothing about his background or strengths or weaknesses other than one result you saw on the Let's Run homepage. But
$20, who wins, Rotich or Fink? We'll double up our soccer bet that we did last week. You knew you took advantage of me in that bet. John and I had a secret bet on a soccer match last week. John was getting 3-1 odds, and we bet even money. But
that's your own idiocy. You didn't do your.
I know you took advantage of
bets where you don't know what you're betting on. Willie Fink versus Anthony Rotich. You know what? I'm going with my boy. He ran 744 in Boston, Robert. Well then, Willie
Fink did?
Willie Fink, $20.
What?
You're on.
This is unfair. I didn't know he ran a 744.
No, we're on.
He ran a 744?
Yeah.
But no, he's a miler, Weldon.
This is unfair. I didn't know this. Can I take it back?
No.
Okay, I'm on the record. Once I make a bet, I don't take it back.
You got all angry. I wasn't even going to take your bet, and now you're mad that
This is once again John using facts to take advantage of someone. This is loan sharking and terrible. We need to protect the innocent. It's like you can't have an interest rate you don't understand.
Okay, guys, I really apologize for the unprofessionalism of Weldon and Jonathan on this podcast. I said we were going to get rid of Jonathan. I may get rid of Weldon and just have the Rojo podcast because, first of all, Weldon has repeatedly on this podcast said, without looking it up, without knowing the stats. So he just got back from Europe. Maybe he's still jet lagged.
He needs to take a page out of Robert's book, and when he doesn't know something, ask me, and I will provide the information. Right, Robert? That makes you a lot smarter.
Yes. The little known secret is, folks, we don't really re-edit this podcast, but if I don't know something, you can pause and look something up real quick, and then the software takes out
Robert, you're blowing the farm. Why are you telling them this?
But to call Willie Fink a miler, I mean, this was a guy that was running the steeplechase at NCAAs repeatedly, and was he ran on 10,000, 29:04. 13:43, and his PR in the 1500 in college was 3:47. Weldon's calling him, he's a definite miler. So we apologize, Willie. When you win USAs, you will be our guest of the podcast next week.
I'm all aboard Willie Fink train. I'm going to lose this bet. I think Willie should run the 5K at Worlds, just like Purrier. Actually, I'm really impressed. The 29-minute 10K guy? Now, this guy could be the phenom of this year, the breakout phenom. He was actually dropping down in the mile. If I'd done a little research, I would have been raving about Willie Fink's chances at the 3K, and this would be a very different segment. All right, one more thing from indoor track. I think we have to mention Mondo Duplantis, a 6:17 world record by the 20-year-old? 20-year-old. I was like, wait, he's got to be older by now. That's nuts. And this guy was the phenom. Growing up, his dad put a pole vault pit in his backyard. His dad was a world-class pole vaulter. His mom's a very good athlete. His brother was a college baseball player. I think he plays in the minors for the Mets now. So very athletic family. But I guess maybe you'd planned it out that he'd break the world record, but I didn't think it would happen at age 20. This is the highest vault ever, indoor or outdoors. So he's the all-time record holder. I mean, he almost broke it 2 weeks ago. So But what's the limit? How high does he go? I mean, he's already done 617 indoors at 20.
Oh, we're gonna get a Sergei Bubka thing where this guy, like, every, maybe once or twice a year is just gonna be going around and raising the world record by, a centimeter or something, getting those sponsor bonuses. I mean, you just look at, he earlier last week in Dusseldorf, he almost cleared 617. He just brushed it on the way down, and then he gets it in Torun, Poland, and he looks stronger and faster this year. Granted, I haven't studied him extensively, but he's out of college now. I think he said he's improved some of his habits. He's being a little bit more professional. Sky's the limit for this guy, obviously, and he's going to be the Olympic favorite. But just to give a shout out to Sam Kendricks, the two-time defending world champion who beat Duplantis in a great pole vault last year. Sam did break the American indoor record over the weekend as well. He jumped 6.01 in France. I'm kind of surprised. I kind of don't really understand why they weren't at the same meet, but yeah, I don't know. Mondo's certainly the favorite, and his upside's tremendous. But just there are other pole vaulters in the sport.
Interesting. Did they ever have a pole vault at Millrose? The new Millrose.
I think they've done it, but the thing is, the ceiling. I think they get worried. Some of these indoor events, like Mondo, is the ceiling high enough in Millrose for him to be vaulting like 617 or 618? I think so.
Armory.
Well, sometimes they have things hanging down. I don't know. Maybe I'm sounding like an idiot here, but
because the old Millrose at the Garden, the pole vault at an indoor track in a stadium, one of the best events by far is the pole vault because you're up above it, you can see it, they can put lights on it. It's really great. So I didn't even realize Kendricks broke the U.S. American record, but he's 16 centimeters.
Well, he jumped 606 last year outdoors at USA's, so that's pretty damn good.
It's only 6 inches.
Again, folks.
Robert.
I'll be advertising my own podcast soon. Do they do the pole vault at Millrose? They did the pole vault this year at Millrose. Sandy Morris won it.
They did the women's pole vault, Robert.
Yes. You don't think that the Armory is big enough for a 20-foot? By the way,
I don't know. I'm talking.
No one's talking about.
I don't
folks.
know.
Y'all are talking about meters. A lot of our audience works in feet and inches. It's 20 feet, 2 3/4 inches. It's his first vault over 20 feet as well. I think his PR coming in with 6:05, so 6:17. Congratulations to Mondo.
Well, wait, I have a bone to pick on with you there, Robert. I feel like I don't know anything in feet and inches for the jumps anymore, or certainly for the pole vault. I only think in meters. I don't know about. I feel like most track fans, that's just what is used across the world. Do you really think? Like, do you? To me, I get more context out of a 6:17 jump or a 6 meter jump than I do about something in feet and inches. What about you guys?
Feet and inches mean a lot more to me. 20 feet seems high as hell. Sandy Morris, 491 doesn't mean anything to me. When I hear 16 feet, I'm like, damn, that's high.
I mean, in terms of, if you ask me to like mark off 20 feet, how tall is it? Yes, I guess in layman's terms, I guess I understand it more. But in terms of like what's a good pole vault, I know like, 490 is really good. 5 meters is outstanding. Whereas, what's the difference in feet and inches between them? I don't really know. For a woman,
I just had to look up what 20 feet was in meters. Anyone know?
607.
Close. 6096. So I guess 6.10. That's kind of interesting. If you're an American, and you're over 6. So I guess no American's ever been over. What's the outdoor record? No American's ever been over 20 feet.
Yeah, it's 606 by Sam Kendricks at USA's last year.
John, I think hitting the ceiling in the men's pole vault at Millrose might be one of the dumbest things you've ever seen.
There is some meat that this was a legitimate concern. I think they were worried about. Maybe it wasn't Millrose. I'm getting.
But Millrose, there isn't a roof right there. There's there's like a little second deck where people are sitting.
I know, but sometimes there are things that are like scoreboards that overhang, or like banners and stuff like that. I don't know.
I'll edit this part out if you want, Robert.
No, this makes me. It's okay. It keeps me humble, But there's definitely. I've heard at some point in my life there was some indoor arena where people were concerned it was going to be an issue with the men's pole vault because they were going too high. Maybe this was World Indoors back in 2016 or something when I was really getting into the pole vault. There was some meet where there was an issue. Yeah, probably not at Millrose, but it's not my home track there, Weldon. I'm only there once a year, so what do I know?
All right, we got a lot still to talk about. I got a lot to rant about. I mean, last week you held Robert off on the shoes until the second half of the podcast. I think John has a rant to go on. Do we want to talk about shoes, unfortunate situation in Canada, or Galen Rupp?
We have to talk about Galen. I'm shocked that it's an hour into the podcast and we haven't talked about Galen yet. So 61:19 at the Sprouts Mesa Half Marathon in Mesa, Arizona. It's a slight downhill, so it's probably worth a little slower than that. I mean, I don't think there's that much to talk about, though, basically. He was wearing the normal Next Percent shoes. He's back. He wins in 61 mid. He looks pretty good. Robert wrote it up in the week that was. He's like, look, put him on the team. This is all we needed to see from him. I think that's basically the takeaway here.
John. You don't think that a two-time Olympic medalist finishing his first race in how long? Almost
since October 2018.
489 days is a big deal. Let's Run would not, without Galen Rupp pumping that message board for the last 10, 15 years, Let's Run would probably be bankrupt. This is a big deal to see him back. I mean, he's been gone for over a year. Thank God Alberto got himself in some trouble, so there was something to talk about. But we survive on talking about Galen Rupp and Alberto Salazar. So it's a big deal to see him healthy, to see him running well. I said put him on the team, but since then I've been thinking a little bit about it, having some second guesses. Only in the sense of, I can't remember if someone texted me or someone put this on the message board. Someone said, but what if he was actually on drugs under Salazar? You're assuming that he's, and I said, well, I didn't think about that, But no, I'm still very confident because he looked relaxed running this. He's running just as fast as Jerry Ward did in Houston. If you add in like 25 seconds for the downhill or whatever it was. So,
what about the course? Maybe he won't. The Atlanta course is like nothing. No one has ever seen.
I did think about that. What if his like Achilles pops in the hills or something? I just think it's unlikely. His coach said he was relaxed.
I made this mistake 4 years ago. I didn't pick him to win the trials, even though I knew he was the best guy easily in the field. I overthought myself. I was like, well, it's his first day, it's his debut. Other people got to me. No. Galen Rupp's winning the Olympic marathon trials. He's going to have the freaking alpha flies on his feet. This isn't a debate. It's a race for the next two spots.
John, what about Jim Walmsley? The guy getting the most attention for the trials. Actually, our sponsor, Hoka Onaoni. We're going to have Jim on the podcast next week. Returning guest. But he got 3 profiles national yesterday. One in New York Times Magazine, one in Sports Illustrated, and one in Runner's World. They all came out the same day. It's kind of crazy how much publicity he's going to get. There's like jillions of threads about Jim on Let's Run.
But don't worry. I have not read those profiles yet, but I've already heard complaints about them. That clearly, I think someone was telling me the New York Times author clearly didn't understand running and didn't do a good job. So, folks, just wait till our podcast. We will ask. You will learn more from listening to us than reading this crap from other people.
Yeah, what? Okay, first of all, the New York Times thing, I thought it was very good. And there's mention of, I could pull up the exact quote, but like, online running forums, plural. Come on, we know what you're talking about. There's only one online running forum. Let's not pretend. They should have just put a link straight to us. That's my only beef with the article. I thought it was pretty interesting. And that's the one most people are going to read. It's going to be, I think, the Sunday magazine feature this upcoming week. So tons of publicity for him. I mean, it's intriguing. Like the best ultra marathoner who has actual, I don't know how you want to say it, track pedigree background that you can sort of in your mind think, hey, maybe there's a chance.
Yeah, I thought it was an interesting story, but there was a very telling quote in that New York Times Magazine story from Scott Fauble. He said, let's be clear about this. Jim squeaked into the trials in the half marathon. He ran 64 flat on the fastest course in the country. If his name wasn't Jim Walmsley and all he'd run is 64 flat, nobody would be like, oh man, this guy's making the team. Which I think is a pretty interesting, comment from a guy who actually is one of the favorites. But I think Jim, it's going to be fascinating to see what he does. But I just don't think he's on Fauble's. He hasn't shown anything to indicate he's on Fauble's level as a marathoner, and we don't even know if Fauble's going to make the team.
I understand the sentiment. I think Jim got everything he could have asked for his debut. And this is his debut marathon, which is kind of crazy for an ultra marathoner. I think that's getting some help. One of these reasons people are getting publicity. And it's sort of the unknown. People love talking about hypotheticals in sports, like, oh, if you put an ultra guy versus this or such and such. There's a lot unknown. But this course is so difficult, it's like maybe that can help equalize things for him. If they hadn't they took out a couple hills on this course. Jim, I'm sure, would have loved to have those hills put back in the course.
Chris Chavez actually made a good point in his story on Walmsley. He mentioned, like, he's just a wild card. No one knows what he's going to do. And if all these other guys are being cautious on the hills, let's say Walmsley makes a break at like 10 miles and tries to do what Yuki did in 2018 Boston, or what Meb did at 2014 Boston. And people say, he'll come back. It's the ultramarathon guy. Don't worry about him. And then he just gets so much ground that he ends up being able to sneak out for third, pull it out for third or something. Is that going to happen? Probably not. But I think it makes an interesting wild card. We don't know how he's going to do on this course.
I want to keep my Jim Walmsley comments until I actually interview him this weekend. My interview is going to be tomorrow with him. Don't want to disparage him publicly on this podcast before I interview him tomorrow. But folks, first of all, Fable, Jim did run 62:14 on January 19th. Now that was a short course. They said it was about a minute short for a woman, so maybe a little bit less. So like that's 63 low. I mean, that's a little bit faster than Chris Derrick ran this weekend. So let's go back to Rupp though. Enough Walmsley talk. Rupp, impressive. We're all in agreement on the team, barring a DNF.
Yeah.
Okay. Another half marathon. I just mentioned him. At the rock and roll race in New Orleans last weekend, Chris Derrick, this is a guy that fractured his fibula, I think, at the Crim 10 miler in August.
By stepping in a pothole. Just awful luck.
But thumbs up to Chris. He didn't do what so many people nowadays would do and sue the city or anything like that. John wrote him off and said he was out of the trials. Chris didn't listen to Jonathan Galt. Got back in it. Within 4 weeks he was running. Apparently it's a non-weight-bearing bone. Within 10 weeks he was running workouts. He reports to me that he's running between 130 and 140 miles a week with Andy Bumbalo in Colorado. And they have both shown up at this rock and roll race. They both have run 64 minutes, right, John? 64:09 and 64:10. Now, that's not very fast time, obviously, for a half marathon if you're going all out, but they said it was a workout and a race environment. And I think they did like some more mileage before and afterwards. So, any chance, guys, that either one of them makes the team? To me, Derrick is one of the most accomplished runners in American history that has not made an Olympic team. I guess you could put Ben True in that with his 13:02 there as well.
Yeah, I mean, if you ask me if Chris Derrick coming out of college, 2012 NCAAs, if you asked me would he make an Olympic team, I would have said absolutely. He'll make it either in 2012 when he was fourth or 26. I mean, if Dathan Ritzenheim had made the marathon team in 2012, Chris Derrick probably makes that Olympic squad because he doesn't come back and run the trials. But I just don't. I still think there are just so many other people who have done more than Derrick in the marathon, and even at full strength, I don't know if he would have had enough to beat the guys like Ward or Fable or Purrier or Rupp. I just think cracking that top four is so tough. And then when you add in coming back from injury, I know he's back running, but I just don't think either of these guys. I think they're in that big group that if they have a really great race, then one of the top four sort of falters, they might have a chance. I'm not writing him off, but I don't see either way. I don't see either of them making this team.
And you said Derrick's one of the most accomplished American runners not to make the Olympics. It started me thinking, like, what are his accomplishments? I'm like, is he one of the fastest not to make it? He's never won a USA Outdoor Track title. I guess he is. I think he's was at least the American collegiate 10K fastest guy ever. He won one NCAA title on the track? He's won a.
He never won NCAAs.
Really?
4-time top 10 finisher at NCAA cross.
Yeah, so he's never won an NCAA title. He did win a USA cross country title. That's it.
3. He won 3 of those.
Oh, he did? Wow.
Yeah, he was top 10 at World Cross.
He's just more of a cross country runner, I guess, which is kind of crazy. But he's a very good runner. I don't see him making the team. I think one thing interesting, and so we go there now to the shoes, but everyone's talking about.
Oh, wait, he has the Alpha Flies. I forgot. He'll have the Alpha. Never mind. He's on the team, everyone. He's on the team. No, I'm just kidding. But that could help. That could really legitimately help him.
My main thing is if some unsponsored guy, one of these spares who ran 210 or 211, I don't think some of these guys might be unsponsored. If one of them makes the team, we'll know why.
Okay, back to Derrick. First of all, he ran 27:31 in college, which is pretty damn good. The year after college, he ran 13:08, which is pretty damn good. He hasn't done much since then. It's been a lot of injury. That Achilles injury, I don't know, makes me nervous. But Bumbalo, people forget, Bumbalo is right with those other Americans in Chicago this year in 211. So, yes, there's a big gap drop between Fauble, Ward, Career, and Rupp down to these 211 guys. But I would throw them in the mix with everybody else in Chicago and say they've got some sort of a chance if these four other people screw up. But I think last week we kept all Vaporfly talk until the end of the show. I think we should do it again this week. That worked well. I want to turn to a amazing piece of journalism, but a very disturbing story from north of the border, from Canada. And journalist Michael Doyle, who used to be the editor of Canadian Running Magazine, has done an amazing story. It is out in the Globe and Mail in Canada. That is the largest paper in all of Canada. It was on the very front page of the paper, I think, last weekend. And the story is basically a total takedown of former Guelph coach Dave Scott Thomas, who was a top Canadian coach and Olympic coach for Canada. And it includes allegations from Megan Brown, a former top Canadian teenage prodigy, an Olympic hopeful, who basically alleges that Scott Thomas groomed her for sex. They had a sexual relationship. She even says that at one point he checked her out of a mental hospital and had sex with her. Just a really horrific story, but an amazing piece. If you haven't read it, find it. Go to the Let's Run homepage and find it and read it now. And it's just really powerful journalism. Scott Thomas had already been suspended after a recent second allegation had come out. But this story apparently had been sort of, I called up Michael Doyle yesterday and spoke to him, guys, for about an hour on the phone to see how this story originated. It's really a fascinating backstory. I don't know if you guys are aware of it or not. But
well, it just seemed to me that a lot of the Canadian athletes have spoken out of it, said it was kind of an open secret that they knew something was up about Dave Scott Thomas and this woman, Megan Brown. But if you read the article, Dave Scott Thomas had essentially told them, she made this up. That's what he told Reed Coolsett, one of his former athletes. And there was he was essentially trying to discredit her. And now it was only now that she's really told the full story in her version of events.
Correct. I think a lot of athletes were told she was crazy and blah, blah, blah. And she was actually inspired by Mary Cain. She says, well, anyways, the way it went down was, according to Michael Doyle, Doyle said that everyone heard this story, that something had happened between the two of them a long time ago. You're talking, 15, 16 years ago. But he didn't know the details. And then in the middle of this year, apparently there has been a second allegation. This woman has not gone public, but Athletics Canada briefly published that it was sexual in nature. Then they've now taken that back off the website. But basically a second allegation came up, and he, in the middle of the season, sort of stopped coaching. I think he tried to hide the fact that he was suspended. So when Doyle heard that this year, he decided to do some investigation. So he reached out to Megan Brown himself and just said, hey, look, I've heard rumors for a long, long time. If you want, I'm sorry if I'm off base, but if there's something that you want to share, I'd be willing to tell your story. And she got in touch with him very quickly and said, I think the time is right. A year or two, maybe not, but thanks to Me Too, thanks to Mary Cain, she specifically cited Mary Cain. So Mary, you're having an impact. She said the time is now. She said she might have been fearful of shame in the past, but she told her story. And apparently, talking to Doyle about how the journalism of this works, like this story has been very well vetted. There's tons of lawyers. He told me that even the notification, the push notification to announce that there's a story was vetted by the lawyers because they're obviously fearful of lawsuits because there's some explosive allegations in there. So it's just really interesting how it went down. So a great job by both Doyle for reaching out to Megan Brown and for Megan Brown for having the courage to come forward. And I think really they probably wanted to stop this from happening again. But Doyle told me something really interesting. He said, part of the story also is Megan Brown she was a teenager at the time, and her mother was totally healthy. And then 17 days later was dead because a mosquito bit her. She was a victim of the West Nile virus. Imagine that. So you're going through the trauma of losing your mother, and then she finds running, and she is a prodigy. And then a coach violates the trust that's given to coach. And he Coach Doyle said something interesting to me. He's like, look, when you're 17 and everything is going well, almost every 17-year-old is a psychological mess when things are going well. And when things aren't going well, it's even harder. And a coach has a great deal of power. It's really your responsibility as a coach not to do it. And there's been some interesting topics about this.
Like, whoa. Like, coach, this is a 17-year-old minor high school girl. Like, let's not compare it to some other coach, like, sleeping with an athlete. This is like, yeah, some of the same things are involved, but this is just so, like, beyond the pale. It's a crime. Like, some of these things, obviously, coaches shouldn't be doing, but, like, I assume he can be prosecuted for this now? Assuming it can be proven, in a court. Like, it's just so beyond the pale. And some people say, oh, this is similar issues to other coaches. In some ways, yes, but in some ways, no, because the United States, Canada, this is a crime.
Well, the weird thing that I thought from this story is it's a heartbreaking story and some gruesome details in there, but the author Doyle tried to sort of link this to the win at all costs culture that Dave Scott Thomas had, and that this was a big issue, and I just don't really see this connection. To me, this is a coach abusing his power with an athlete. I don't think that's a reflection of the win at all costs culture he had instilled at the University of Guelph and with Speed River.
I agree with you for the most part, John. I think it was part of the fact that he was viewed as a guru. Like the fact that he pushed a few other athletes through injuries, to me, is totally unrelated to this aspect. But I think he did have this was a guy that was being put on to lead national teams. He was sort of trying to transform them into almost like he wanted to be like the NCAA power of Canada. They don't really have NCAA type running there, but that's what he was trying to turn Guelph into. But yeah, that's sort of a side point. Just incredible journalism. And I promised Michael Doyle that I would give him a shout out. He has actually an XC newsletter called the XC Substack. So if you go to the xc.substack.com, you can check out his weekly newsletter. I also think he has a podcast. So some really good stuff from him last week that was really, really very, very powerful.
All right. Well, on a more positive note, we do have some good news to share this week. And this is an email we received a couple of weeks ago. And it's about a guy named Tom Slattery who qualified for the Olympic trials with a little help from Let'sRun.com. So he emailed us out to, say he was happy to share his story, and we figured we would let you guys hear about this. So this is from January 20th. He sent this email right after the Houston Half Marathon. Weldon and Rob. Interesting. Rob, not Rojo or Robert. I hope all is well leading into a new week. I wanted to reach out to say a quick thank you, as it would not have been possible for me to hit the Olympic trials mark in Houston yesterday without the community on Let's Run's message boards. I ran my first marathon at CIM and missed the OTQ by 10 seconds, running 2:19.09. Since it was a Sunday, I took the red-eye back to New York so I could get to work the next morning, and my boss informed me that my position was being switched to a sales role at the credit lending startup I was at, so my position was going to end. He was going to tell me on Friday, but he held off because of the race, thankfully. Many of my teammates and friends convinced me to run Houston, as I originally was not intending on racing. I pleaded with the organizers to grant me a race entry for the marathon and was extremely bummed that I had to pay $142 to get into the ADP section, as I was on an extremely tight budget and basically broke. I pulled all my airline points together for the flight. The cheapest return flight was 2 hours after the race ended, and made a thread asking if anyone would be willing to split an Airbnb, as anything else would have been way too expensive for me. Luckily, I got a response from Evan Schwartz and his fiancée, Sakiko Minagawa, who also has the OTQ, who said they had some room in their Airbnb. So I was able to stay on their couch for the weekend. It was actually super comfortable, and thankfully, I was able to get a good night's rest before the race. Again, thank you for providing the platform for occasions like this, which, and this is very cliche, enabled my dreams to become reality. Hopefully, I will be able to thank you both in person in Atlanta. Best, Tom Slattery. And we should give you the actual result here. Tom ran a PR. He ran 2:18.35 in Houston to get under by 25 seconds. I mean, just all that stuff. Could you imagine how crazy that is? You missed the Olympic trials qualifier by less than 10 seconds. Then you get found out that your position is being eliminated at your company. And then you get last minute organization to fly out to Houston. You take another crack at it just a month later. You have a flight 2 hours after the race ended. You scramble to find an Airbnb, and he gets the OTQ. I mean, find me a better story in the sport than that.
And what are we being praised for? Just having a message board that allowed him to get a free room. You deserve the credit. You deserve the credit.
Yeah.
Coming back through that adversity.
Yeah, people, we are great. That is proof of it right there. Proof. Show your greatness to Jonathan Galt. Everyone, be like Des. Be like Des Linden and tip the podcast. You can tip the podcast in the show notes. John, another subscription. We got a big tip from somebody who works at a shoe company, John. If I reveal the shoe company, though, maybe you'll be biased. You're pretty much... All these shoe companies now are going to start tipping John off.
Here's what we need. We need all of the shoe companies to give an equal amount. Therefore, I can't be biased towards anyone. So they all should just give $1,000 each.
Now I mentioned.
And hey, another sponsors plug. We got to do some sponsors here. If you're still listening, all these other podcasts do sponsors like every 6 minutes. We do them a couple times. You can still go to Atlanta Marathon Trials and run the Publix Atlanta 5K, 10K, half marathon, or marathon the day after. Make it a great weekend in Atlanta. Or if you're on the West Coast, the Can-Am XC Cup is February 29th, actually same day as Olympic trials. So if you're in Canada, check it out. Beautiful British Columbia. Maybe you'll run into Prince Harry and Meghan Markle out there, guys, if you're there as well. So added benefit of going to British Columbia. And once again, big shout out to Hoka, One. They are taking to the trials this month, and we've been featuring all their athletes running at the trials. So thank you to all of them.
And while you're at it, rate and review the podcast 5 stars. Share it with all your friends. Let's, guys, we're going to have great coverage coming up. Olympic marathon trials, Boston Marathon, London Marathon, Olympics. There's so much to talk about this year. You want to follow it by listen to the podcast. If you like it, give us a review. Give us 5 stars. Spread the word.
Okay, guys. You also forgot to drop the fact that we're going to still have the Joe. I was thinking we're ending with Vaporflies, but we still have the Joe Rubio interview.
No,
Nice.
John has already said the Vaporflies have to go last. So that means Rubio. Should we do Rubio now?
You guys made a big deal about this. I need to go on my Oscars rant too.
And we need to have Iowa caucus talk.
Wait, do they have the results of the Iowa caucus yet? I thought they still didn't have the results.
I don't know, but I'll share the inside story from our boots on the ground. Folks, we've been accused of being a right-wing news outlet because my father used to work for George W. Bush. Nothing could be farther from the truth. The only Let's Run employee that has voted, he lives in Iowa, the web programmer Eric. He's voted for Bernie Sanders. And he was boots on the ground, folks. The night that they were having trouble reporting the stuff, he was not happy at all. He said it would take him 15 minutes to make a web form that could report these results, and he didn't understand what was taking so long. And he seemed to imply that it was all part of a conspiracy to prevent Bernie from doing well. And Bernie had the most votes in Iowa, but did not get the most delegates. Very interesting. So there you have some little inside scoop from Eric, the web programmer.
Yeah, I don't even know how all that caucusing stuff works. So. Yeah.
Oh, one other interesting thing about Eric, guys, is his wife is a physician, but he is for Bernie. I'm like, wow, this is going to wipe out your wife's income if we have free, government mandated health care. But he feels very passionately about this. He has a son that was born with hemophilia. He's like, look, we have health care, we're fine. But I've seen the bills. It's $24,000 a month that his health care pays for this drug. So imagine if he's like, if I didn't have health care, my life would be ruined for the rest of my life because you'd be just declaring bankruptcy after bankruptcy after bankruptcy. So interesting take there, folks, on it. And my take is all these conservatives, free market or you have to buy health insurance. Folks, there's no such thing really as a free market for healthcare. Like, what is the right price for this drug? If it's going to save someone's life and it's $1 billion and you're a billionaire, it's $999 million. You'll pay whatever you have to get it. So that's Rojo's rant. John, let's hear your Oscars rant.
Yeah, so I watched the Oscars on Sunday, and I watched a decent amount of the movies this year. I don't know. I watched both Parasite and 1917, and everyone on Twitter, and Twitter has been accused sometimes of being a liberal echo chamber, and I think in this case maybe it was, a bunch of these millennials. I would say I am a liberal millennial, so I'm sort of Twitter's target audience, but everyone on my timeline is just freaking out. They're like, if Parasite didn't win, it would have been a huge tragedy. It would have shown that the Academy is just a bunch of old racist white guys, that they didn't pick this movie over 1917, which had basically There was one woman in the entire movie, and it was all white dudes. And to me, I just think, like, can we just remember these are films, and it's sort of a subjective... It's like some people... I liked 1917 more than Parasite. I thought they were both amazing movies. I think Parasite's a worthy winner. But is it the end of the world because if they had picked 1917 because they liked it, heaven forbid, just because they liked it more as a movie than Parasite, is that a massive issue, and does that make everyone in Hollywood racist? I don't know. I just think it was being way overblown. Like, what if 1917 was a better movie and it beats Parasite? Like, is that a massive issue? Like, Parasite, everyone's saying, oh, it's 100%, it's clearly objectively better. It's like, how many films are objectively better than other films? It's a very subjective thing. I don't know. It just kind of upset me that people were thinking, oh, it's going to be some huge tragedy if Parasite loses. But it's a good movie, worthy Best Picture winner, so congrats to them.
John, I'm glad that you have gotten that off your chest. Millennials, this is free therapy for you. But this is really a problem. Again, another reason why we should get rid of you. It's a problem with you of what's in your timeline. John, Twitter, get off of it. It's like a woke purity test for so many people. It doesn't need to be that. Like, I actually read a stat. I think it was either the New Hampshire or Iowa primary. Like, these are liberals, these are Democrats that are voting. Like, what percent of the voters are actually even on Twitter? People like you think everyone's on Twitter. No, something like only 20 or 30%. I think it was 20% of the voters in the Democratic primaries are even on Twitter. Like, Twitter is not as big as people think. Maybe for young people it is. But in terms of this movie, I'll admit I haven't seen it, but I heard someone else say it. I think it was a sports radio host, Coach Travis. He's like, look, it was a good movie, but would it have won if it wasn't a Korean movie? No. So it's just people voting for it because they want to be woke.
No, I think that's a ludicrous claim. No foreign language movie had ever won Best Picture before this year. To argue that suddenly that's an advantage after 90 plus years of it not being an advantage, I think is wrong. But what makes me upset is, like, I'm looking at this thing and it's making me feel bad about... I'm like, if I like 1917 more than Parasite, does that make me a bad person? Like, last year, I liked Green Book more than Roma. Hey, newsflash, Roma was boring, all right? Does that make me a bad person for liking Green Book more than... Does it make me a racist because I like Green Book? Or
yes, John, there's
Roma,
a huge thing.
Like 1917 more than Parasite? I mean, how about I just like one movie more than another? You know?
Oh, apparently, John, Green Book, there's a lot of stuff with Green Book last year. If you like it too much, I think you're racist. So careful there. Careful. But, hey, I sort of understand the point. I saw Parasite on the plane back from Paris. Good movie. But I was wondering, hey, if this movie had been made in English, would it have won the Oscar? I feel like there's a time and place for something, and the Oscars were sensitive to some of the criticism. I feel like you can't say, but I think sometimes nowadays there is some cachet being underprivileged or whatnot, and sort of these clash of things, identity politics. There's a lot going on in the world right now. Some of it good, and some of it just way, 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 way overreaction. And I think some of these things you're talking about, John, are sort of entering, presidential politics. And sort of one thing I've heard, like, oh, how Bernie, he's a socialist. How can he be doing so well? One, he's consistent. There's a bunch of stuff, there. But also, like, his vision is more inclusive. It's all workers. It's not like, oh, only white men or minority women or whatever. It's like he's reaching out to a more inclusive group instead of like, whereas the rest of the sort of Democratic primary, a lot of them are sort of originally at least trying to focus on like what they were. Oh, I'm a woman who's running for president. I'm a black man. And sort of when you delineate yourself or segment yourself, sometimes the message, the audience you're reaching becomes smaller as a result.
All right. Well, I think everyone has survived our politics talk and our woke Twitter talk. It's now time to crack your beer. I think we need to talk about the shoes.
No, John. Vaporfly talk has to go absolutely last. We still have the Joe Rubio interview. He's the head coach of the Hoka Oni Aggies. I'm very excited about this, folks, because I've been reading these profiles. We've been putting these profiles up of the Hoka trials qualifiers, and many of them are Hoka Aggies. And it just reminds me, I love the blue-collar runners, the ones that have the full-time jobs and are still training. And so many of the Aggies are like that. So, Weldon, tell the people what we have here.
Yep. So Joe Rubio is a pretty interesting guy. I mean, in the sport. First time I ever ran into the Aggies had to be the 2000 trials. I went to my first Olympic trials as an athlete, and there was these kind of crazy people on the backstretch just cheering and having a really good time. And I think, there's the 1500 meter start, and that's kind of their thing. They all now go to the trials, and I'm like, these guys are cool. And it was the Aggies. And Joe then started running Warehouse Trials, one of the leading online retailers. He's just been a coach. He's just like a running lifer. So he talks about coaching the Aggies, his team at the trials, some of the men's team, the women's team, what we're going to get. And then also I included the part where he talks about how Hoka and the Aggies got hooked up, because I didn't even know that story. Joe just has like so much knowledge, but he knows like the sort of, I'm like, how did Hoka, like no one had heard of Hoka 5 years ago. And he talks about how the former CEO of Deckers, Angel Martinez, there's an AM on the Hoka Aggies logo, the original Aggies logo. I mean, the Aggies have had ASICS as a sponsor, Reebok as a sponsor in the past. And the eventual CEO of Deckers was an original Aggie. So it's kind of crazy. And then another Aggie, Jim Van Dyne, was the president of Hoka at one point. So there's strong connections between them, and sort of, it's totally a blue collar. It's one of the most diverse running groups in the world as well. And I really realized that. But they got 2 Indian Americans on the team. Like, John, you're younger. Like, what do you know of the Aggies?
Yeah, I kind of just knew their reputation. They seem to like to have fun and kind of party at the Olympic trials, and that they are a running group. That's basically all I knew about them.
Yep. So that's a perfect intro. They have qualification standards, but they're a real team. You have to run the Centipede at the Beta Breakers. They have a good time. It makes sense now how the Aggies and Hoka got hooked up. So here it is, sponsored segment by Hoka One One. Highlights with Joe Rubio. Joe Rubio is the head coach of the Hoka One One Aggies and the founder of Running Warehouse. No other way to put it, Joe is a running lifer. A 2-time Olympic marathon trials qualifier, he finished 26th at the 1996 Olympic marathon trials. Back in 1987, he started training and living with a guy named Mark Conover. The unheralded Conover went on to win the 1988 Olympic marathon trials. I first met Joe at the 2000 Olympic track trials in Sacramento, where a group then called the Reebok Aggies was making a lot of noise and having a lot of fun on the backstretch. The Aggies are still having a lot of fun today and are now sponsored by Hoka One One. All in all, the Aggies have about 150 members. They have running members, social members, and about 60 of those are competitive. We'll put a link in the show notes. You can be a member of the Aggies if you live out in California. They got groups in the Bay Area, Santa Barbara, and San Luis Obispo. Barring injury or illness, it looks like they will have 6 participants at the trials. We tried something a little bit different with Joe. We're just going to do highlights. So here it is, first starting, Joe talking about the team nature of the Aggies.
We have athletes all over Northern California, and what we try to do is want to make sure that we are a club, so we don't have hired guns that come in that you're just meeting on the starting line. We have a participation requirement that, okay, here's a list of races, and you're required to run 2 of these in addition to our Pacific Associated Cross Country Championships and be available for the Beta Breaker Centipede, and all those, really build bonds between the athletes. And also keeps, it's fun stuff. Initially they might look at it with skepticism, but once they do it, they have a blast. And like at the PA Cross Country Championships, we have close to 80 people out there as spectators and athletes. And we have a huge picnic afterwards, and it's really pretty cool. It's really fun. The trials thing, I can't emphasize enough to my athletes what a big deal it is, because when I did it, sometimes your parents are trying to figure out what the heck you're doing still running, right? And then when you tell them you qualified for the Olympic trials, everyone understands that. Everyone. Your aunt who's never followed running in her life is saying, my nephew's trying to make the Olympic team, and brags to all their friends, right? And your boss gets it. So I need some time off, a little additional time off to make practice. Sure, you try to make the Olympic team. All that stuff is a big deal. And also, right now, I have working relationships with people around the world. And when you tell people from Japan that you ran 2:18 and you ran the Olympic trials marathon, they just look at you differently because they have such deep knowledge of how fast marathons are. And when you run certain times in the marathon in different cultures, like in Europe, you tell people how fast you run the marathon, they go, they just look at you differently. There's a huge amount of respect for that. And people don't know times in America so much, but they do understand that you made the Olympic trials.
In particular about the trials, what can you expect from your guys and girls? Like, what's some people, I think, who don't really get the trials. Like, why are people doing it? They're not going to make the team. And I'm sure some people dream of making the team, but like, what do you think the best somebody can do at the trials is? And also, why do you think, what motivates them to keep trying to get better?
It's that challenge, right? It's like, how many people honestly think they're going to win NC D1 title, right? Maybe a handful. But you want to go and perform your best when it counts. And when you're able to do that, it's a phenomenal feeling. So in my own case, my last Olympic trials was in 96, and I went in with number 71. So I was 71st ranked runner. I ended up getting 26th, which I thought was a pretty good accomplishment, because going in, I beat my number. And that's the goal that I have for my athletes is, hey, if you can beat what your ranking is going in, you had a pretty good day. And the most satisfying thing as an athlete is to perform your best when it matters. And if you're able to do that at the trials, regardless of where you finish, you feel pretty good about the event. It's a great accomplishment. And the fact that these people get to go and experience racing against the best people in the United States and having a shot at making the team is great. I mean, that's our claim to fame is having, I don't want to say nobodies, but people that weren't really seen as favorites do very well at the trials and nationals and so forth. So like Conover didn't really know he wasn't on anybody's radar, and he won in '88. And then Jamie Harris won the 1500 at nationals in '99, and no one knew who he was. And we had Linda Summers and Rachel Cook and Jill Boaz and several others make world championship teams. Linda made it in the '96 marathon team. So, it's pretty cool. And every one of those people had a full-time job at the time.
Here, Joe starts talking about the Hoka men's team at the trials, just composed of Sergio Reyes, a former U.S. marathon champ with a 2:13 PR, who's 38 years old, but 2 years ago was running very fast at Cal International before blowing up, and two Indian-American guys, Swarnjeet Boyal, who ran 2:17 this past December, a week before running the club nationals. He went from being a club runner to a D1 conference champion, and Rajpal Panu, also a 2:17 marathoner, who started running because he was overweight and his dad tragically died of a heart attack at age 40.
I mean, we can talk about it now. I mean, Swarnjeet came from Marysville, and he was a walk-on at Cal Poly, and he actually ran for a good buddy of mine, Armando Siqueiros. Armando is the coach of the San Luis Distance Club, which is it's most colleges have a club for competitive runners for the people who don't make the team, and there's actually a national champion for that. Anyways, Armando's the head coach of that, and Armando also coached Jordan Hussein in high school, so he has a pretty good background. And anyway, so he coached Swarnjeet, and Swarnjeet made the jump to Cal Poly, and he ended up running low 29s, and then he started running for me 2 years ago. And where I really saw him shine was when Walmsley ran the world record in the 50 mile. Swarnjeet was his pacer, him and another kid that runs for me, Brian. They were the pacers that took him through, I think, 31 miles. And Swarnjeet just said, he looked so easy with Walmsley. And I said, could you have gone farther? He says, oh, yeah. So I think Swarnjeet's one of those guys that I'm looking down the road and going, he's going to be a heck of an ultra runner. I mean, yeah. And at Cal International, that was this past December, that was his first marathon. And he was running 5:16s, 5:20s for the first 20 miles, and then he ran 5:10s his last 10K. And he got done. I said, how do you feel? He said, felt fine. So he's one of those guys that if we can do some things right, he should run pretty fast. Sergio's another guy. I mean, he's going to be a Masters runner here pretty soon. And at the 2018 Cal International, he was in second place at 24.5 miles on 2:12 pace. And he ended up having a rough finish the last mile, but he still ended up running 2:16. And for a guy that's 38 years old, that's pretty good. Raj Paul's another kid. That's an interesting story. He started running. He was really overweight in high school and started a jogging program, and then ended up going to local community college, getting better. And then he got a scholarship to St. Mary's in Moraga, and ended up making D1 nationals in cross country as an individual. So yeah, pretty interesting stuff. And I believe Hoka is doing a series of stories on these athletes, and there was one yesterday from Raj Paul that, if you get a chance, is really pretty. It's on Instagram. It's really interesting. It talks a lot about being a first generation American Indian from and the pressures from his parents to become a doctor or an engineer, and the running thing isn't really that popular with his family. But he's trying to change stereotypes and expectations within the Indian culture, which is pretty cool. And Swarnjeet's in a similar type of thing. Going back to Sergio, I mean, the guy works for Edwards Air Force Base. So he's a full-time flight engineer there. He has a wife and a kid, and so he's fitting in 120, 130-mile weeks around 40 to 60-hour work weeks as an engineer. Swarnjeet's an engineer. Rajpal's a teacher. Mora has his own business. Liza works in the medical industry. Our entire team is all blue-collar athletes. They're all working full-time. They all have careers. Most have families. A lot of them have kids. And you get a guy like Phil Reed. He's not in the marathon trials this time, but 2 years ago, here's a guy with a full-time teaching job, and in his late 30s, he runs 13:51. And these guys are working full time, and Phil's also coaching. He's the head cross country coach and assistant track coach at Arroyo Grande High School. So we have a lot of stories of that on the team, and no one makes any excuses about having to work full time and not having the ability to take a nap. But the primary goal is to make sure that you have a career after your running stuff is done, so that you can pay the bills. And any money that these people make off of the running circuit is just fun money. They're not making money to pay rent, and they're not making money to pay the bills. Anything they win is kind of, go on vacation or buy presents or, buy that thing that you have your eyes on. But with the support of Hoka and the prize money, some of these athletes are making some pretty significant money on the side. And Hoka's been phenomenal as a sponsor, just in terms of all the support from everyone there, the product, the bonus structure, the travel, opportunities like the Carbon X. But Hoka's phenomenal. We've been with a lot of companies over the years, and this is our best relationship by far.
Now Joe talks about the Hoka women's team, which is composed of Addie Zerinner, a former Arizona runner who was told she ran like Shailene Flanagan as a kid. She taped a picture of Shailene on the wall, and she ran 2:37:51 in her debut. She's coached by Terry Howell in the Santa Barbara Aggies group. We've also got a new member to the Aggies, 2:41 marathoner Annie Deal, who was a D3 runner and is now at the trials, and 2:42 marathoner Lisa Reichert, who has a pretty tough and cool day job. She's a cancer researcher.
Well, like Addie, her first out of the gate was a 2:37 at Grandma's last year. That's pretty good. And she ran for University of Arizona, which tends to be a low mileage program. And I think she's got an excellent chance. Liza as well. Liza's, she had a child. She was hurt over the summer after Napa. She won Napa last year in 2:44. And then she got hurt, and then she decided to focus on cross country. And she ran, for coming off an injury, she ran super tough. So I would say she's looking fantastic. And she's running, we have a few athletes running at Kaiser Permanente half marathon on Sunday. So we'll see how that goes. But I would suspect that she'll run really well.
No one had ever heard of Hoka, 10 years ago? Maybe you're in the shoe industry. Well, maybe, but 5 years ago, barely. And they've sort of just have this sort of carefree spirit that I feel like the Aggies share. But how did you guys get hooked up? How long has this been going?
So we've been with Hoka since 2016, I believe. It's kind of an interesting concept because back when we were looking our contract with ASICS was up, and at the time, one of our founding fathers, Angel Martinez, was president of Deckers, and Deckers owns Hoka. So that was a natural, like our plow, we have a flying plow, and that's actually, if you look at the bottom of it, there's initials AM for Adrian Martinez. So he's president of Deckers, and it was a natural fit. Jim Van Dyne, who was president of...
That's too easy.
Yeah, Jim Van Dyne, who was the president of Hoka, was one of our early members. He made the World Cross Country team. And actually, Jim was a guy who came along and changed the dynamic of Hoka. So he signed Leo Manzano. He signed a lot of the track athletes to try to change the perception of Hoka as a broken old person's shoe. And then Angel retired, and a new group of leaders came in. Wendy Yang, who's the president there, and then Lee Cox came in, and Lee is an old friend. He worked at Reebok. He worked at Innovate. So I've known him for quite a while. He's head of sales and marketing. Then Mike McManus came in, and Mike worked at Adidas for a long time, signed to all their top marathoners. Mike and I ran against each other in high school and college. And he actually was the guy who introduced me to my partners here, because he was head of tennis and running for Adidas, and he knew my partner Drew, so he introduced us. So just long history with a lot of people. And the one thing about the running industry, it's very small, and everyone knows each other, and everyone tends to be really nice to each other, regardless of brand, because people move around and change hats. And, I've been working in this shoe industry since 92, and most of the top people at all the brands are the same people that were there when I started in 92. So, the thing is that the club itself has a great reputation, great athletes, and a lot of it has to do, sponsorship. It's a lot of kids, you talk to them and they think all they think about is, okay, we need to run fast to get sponsorship. And that's not necessarily the case. You need to run fast. Yes, you need to perform, but you need to be good citizens. You need to have good relationships. The brand needs to trust you as an organization to represent the brand in the way they want it represented. They don't want to be embarrassed, right? And I know there's groups of people out there that run fast, but they're, the athletes, when you meet them, are not really great people, and you go, do I want this person representing my brand? You go, no, I don't think so, So even if you have a group of people that maybe aren't as fast, but they're better representatives of the brand, that's going to carry a lot of weight. And so we have some really, really good citizens on our team. And another bonus of our club is we're probably the most racially diverse competitive distance club in the United States. We have men and women, so we have both genders. We have all races, and we're all running distance races, right? And, running tends to be a pretty white-dominated sport. You look at most clubs, and it's a lot of the same color out there. And that's not the case with us. And there's something to be said about that, too. I would say 3 years ago, we did not have much of a women's team. And, they told me point blank, you need to build up your women's squad. And this year we won the women's championship at the Club Cross Country Championships after, doing this for 3 years. So that took quite a bit of work, but we have a great squad of women right now.
Okay. Thank you, Joe. Next week, we will have Jim Walmsley, America's most famous runner now, on the podcast. But we can finally turn to the shoe talk. I want to do a whole podcast on this.
I'm so excited. After just praising, people think the white is pure. The good company, Hoka, One. Now we can talk the evil empire, Nike. I'm joking, people. People on the message board think that I hate Nike. I don't hate Nike. I just hate how they cheated on these shoes and are allowing to get it in 2016. It may cheat again in 2020.
Wait.
So, John.
Really? That's what you think, Robert? I've never had that opinion from you before.
Yes. Last week, John thought that there was nothing else that we could possibly talk about the shoes, but he let me talk about it at the end of the podcast, and it was a great segment. Then, either that day or a day later, it comes out that Nike's actually going to be allowed to use the Alpha Flies. that they conveniently are perfectly suited up for the new World Athletics rules. And John admitted, I said, John, you got to admit now, there's a lot more we can talk about. And John agreed. John, so what has changed your mind? Last week you said this was nothing else to talk about. Now that you say there's plenty for us to talk about, was it the fact that the alpha flies are allowed, or was it perhaps Ross Tucker's new piece that's out in the Science of Sport blog? You tell me.
It's the alpha flies, because we saw those shoes on Kipchoge, and I think most people thought, hey, there's no way in hell those meet the 40 millimeter stack requirement. And I think in some places they are probably taller than 40 millimeters, but not when they're being measured on a size 8 shoe from like the specific part that they're measured at. Nike probably, you know, you can speculate whether Nike knew that or not going in before the rules were announced. But I think I expected, I'm like, oh, okay, Nike, they have these alpha flies, and now they have to do some work to adjust them to make sure they're competition legal. And then for them to come out essentially a week later and say, hey, yeah, they're competition legal, we're ready, we're going to roll them out, you know, all our athletes are going to have them at the trials. And I just look at them and I'm just like, oh, they're pretty close to what Kipchoge wore in Vienna. And I just start worrying. I'm like, if they're as good as Nike is, as the rumors are flying, and Sean Engel of The Guardian has said that they could be a 7 or 8% running economy increase. I mean, do you just think of the advantage that the Vaporflies have had the last few years, the next percent, and tack on another 3 percentage points on there? I just get really worried that the integrity of the sport is at stake at the Olympic trials and the Olympics, and we're going to have the medals and the people making the team determined by the equipment, not by the runners.
Yeah, I think John explained it, but I want to make sure we're sort of everybody clear and understands the picture. Nike had a media event last week in New York. Also, I find it curious, Let's Run never gets invited to these things. Do you think they'd want, like, I think we're the second biggest running website in the United States at these things, but maybe because we're more critical, we never get invited. But anyway, besides the point. And at this event, they said, hey, the Alpha Fly's coming out, and by the way, the shoe Kipchoge wore for his sub 2, they're claiming that was legal. And the week before, when the rules came out that said no shoe going forward with more than a 40 millimeter stack height would be legal, everyone assumed, I had not seen anyone assumed that Kipchoge's shoe would not be legal. And so at the time, everyone thought, okay, there's some compromise here. These rules aren't just going to cement a Nike advantage. Nike's going to have to dial things back. The other shoes, hopefully, companies can catch up and we'll have a level playing field. And instead, these rules, it just comes in that Nike shoe, allegedly, at least Nike's claiming this, there's been no outside independent verification of this, that they say Kipchoge's shoe, actually, the one he ran in, would have come in at 39.5 millimeters. That's pretty damn convenient. So did these rules just sort of cemented the Nike's advantage, at least for this Olympic trials? Because also now there's a deadline here people can't catch up with. It's just sort of crazy. Speaking of crazy, there's a Twitter person named Crazy Daisy. If you're out there, I want to talk to you. She's some sort of competitive runner. She knows a lot about the shoe stuff. She's always chimed in on this. She knows way more than me. And last week when I was in Paris, I'm like, what is Crazy Daisy saying about this? And Crazy Daisy, there's no tweets. She's deleted all of her tweets. They're gone. It's nuts. Like, I think she got so fed up, she's like, this is it, and just purged Twitter.
I was wondering perhaps if she was an employee or something and they found out who she was and she was going to get sued or something. Like, all the tweets are deleted. Like, this is an expert. Please contact us. Email us, letsrun@letsrun.com. Immediately, Crazy Daisy, we have to hear you. You have the inside scoop. So it's weird. People were kind of okay with the rules because we thought the alpha flies would be banned, but then we already knew that Kip said, she's like, this will be fine in a year or two, but it's not going to be fine now. These other shoe companies need to let people wear these other shoes. Well, we don't know that they're going to do that. And I don't know. It's just going to be very interesting to me what's going on here. To me, what made this a bigger story is I think people find it very convenient that Seb Coe used to work for Nike and all of a sudden now the new rules allow the new shoes. I'm not saying that there was sort of undue talking between them, but that's the problem with our sport. There's so many connections between everybody. And then I thought the Ross Tucker piece was very powerful. Now, Ross is paid by Adidas at times, but he's a sports scientist, and his powerful piece is like, look, one of the problems with these shoes is different people respond very differently to these shoes. So some people get a 6% advantage, some people get a 0% advantage. So do we really want that in shoes? The issue I have is the money involved. What are we going to do about the college level? Everybody has to have a $250 pair of shoes. Now, I know these aren't good for track races, but imagine this was a spike. If this was a spike, if there was a $300 spike that is good for 5 races and it's 6% better than anything else, do you want to have so only the college teams that can afford that spike are going to be good? No, I don't think we want shoe being the key component of who wins the race. And that's what Russ Tucker said. Is that when the difference between shoes is greater than the difference between the average elites, then you've got a major problem. And that's the problem we have now. Now, Seb Coe has said, and I totally disagree with this, we can't go back on something that is already out there. I disagree. Of course you can go back. They went back on the swimsuits. They've gone back on golf equipment. This reminds me of Uber. Nike released a shoe without permission. They just came out, released it, and they think, oh, once people start using it, we're not going to go back. Uber just went into cities where it didn't have permits. Everyone started using it, and like, oh, we can't go back. Yes, you can. Some cities have banned Uber.
Robert, you're saying there isn't a spike. There are spikes. There's the Viperfly. There's the Nike Air Zoom Victory. I've heard the Viperfly could be 1% different, which is like a tenth of a second in 100, which is huge. Apparently, it just really helps you finish the end of races better. Now, again, maybe we're just playing into the Nike marketing hype here, but there was also a lot of hype about the Vaporflies when they came out in 2017, and it proved to be true. I mean, these shoes, we've yet to see how much they'll change the game on the track, but it's certainly possible that we could have a similar situation in the sprints and the middle distances.
And that was one of the things I said on the message board was, I think it's good to think of it in terms of spike. John's worried about a spike with 1%. We're talking about a shoe that's 3%, 4%, 6% running economy, maybe 4% in terms of performance. I mean, that's a lot. The analogy I said was like, look, if you had a spike like this for middle distance, Ben True would be the best 5,000 meter runner in the world. He would go from 13:02 to consistently 12:45 and would be winning everything. Do we want that?
Well, as a Dartmouth alum, I think some of us... No, I'm just kidding. But, yeah, it's a fair point.
I think that one thing needs to be done, because I just am worried. I mean, the next percent seems better than the other shoe. And the people are putting their head in the stand. It's like people are denying that global warming is occurring. Global warming happens. The question is, like, how bad is it going to be and how much money do we need to spend to stop it? You know, to pretend that these shoes aren't an advantage is crazy. And we want a level playing field, and what can we do about it? So I think it sounds like it's pretty easy to test these shoes. So I think real quickly the IAAF needs to start testing all these shoes, but that'll be too late, right? Because the Olympic trials, anyone can run that. The 4-month window, if the IAAF tests these shoes and just decides they're just too much better than everything else, then I think maybe they would step in and ban them. But that won't help anyone who doesn't make an Olympic team because they don't have them. So there's a lot of questions to be asked, and I don't know, just sort of the way the news was presented and everyone was in agreement, alpha flies aren't going to be allowed. It's sort of just like, okay, at least something's being stopped here. We're trying to level the playing field. Then it's like, oh, by the way, these made it in by 0.5 millimeters. And then I went and was trying to measure my wife's shoes compared to my shoes today and see how tall the stack height could be and, see this stuff. Enforcing this rule is going to be hard. If you got to have a, measure a size 8 universal shoe and all this stuff.
Yeah. And some people say, well, Nike invented a great shoe. You can't stop progress. Well, you can if you want to. And they did make an amazing shoe. And I've said that. But to me, I don't understand how people don't acknowledge how is a 4% advantage in one person's shoe not an unfair assistance. Now, I guess you could say other people could go out and buy the shoe. And that's true. And I think that's on the other shoe companies. If they're going to allow this shoe, the other shoe companies need to let their athletes buy them. But, to me... Or don't sign. People say don't sign with the company. What do you mean? Most people have 3-4 year contracts. They've already signed with the company. They're in college athletes. They have to run in a certain pair of shoes. They can't just get out of these deals, But and Seb Coe's like, oh, we can't move. How people are so obsessed with drugs, and you eat a speck of tainted beef in your band, or your American record is nullified. I promise you, these shoes are worth more for Galen Rupp's than any drug Alberto Salazar may or may not have given him. I mean, 4%? Are you kidding? What drug does that? This is crazy. I don't understand how people are like, how is it unfair? How is having a piece of equipment that makes you 4% better than someone else that they can't wear not unfair? It is unfair. Oh, but I do have an apology. I did not do what I said I would do last week. I will do it today. I promised that I would write the IAAF and say, A, is this an acknowledgement that what happened in 2016 is wrong? That's what I want to do, number one. That's point number one. And point number two is I'm going to ask him the second question. How is having a piece of equipment that makes you 4% better than someone else unfair assistance? I guess you could say unfair assistance, not unfair assistance.
Well, because we don't have the data back on the Alpha Fly, Robert, and this is the question, is once we start getting these results, and if they start testing the Alpha Fly and scientifically showing these performance and efficiency gains, will Sebco and World Athletics come out and ban it? Because they said that, they're conducting these studies and they're willing to revise their regulations as necessary. Well, a lot of people see the current regulations, they see that Nike just snuck under them, and whether Nike had influence into them or not, people are going to say this is favoring Nike. You don't have the guts to stand up to Nike. And I think the question is going to be, if the Alpha Fly gets the performance results that people expect it to, will World Athletics take a stand and say, no, this is a bridge too far, we need to ban these shoes for the fairness of the sport?
I mean, who knows if they will, but this other shoe's been out there for 3 years, and it was shown to have an advantage, and they didn't do anything about it. So I'm not optimistic. I just wish that this new latest version had been limited, because it seems like each version keeps getting better. That would have been at least some hope that one brand won't have an advantage. And everyone's like, oh, the other brand should just catch up. Well, it's been 3 years and they haven't caught up. And there's some hope that, everyone's sort of trying to rush out to try to be close by this Olympic trials. And, at least the companies are dropping something. By the Olympics, I guess then stuff will have to be out for 4 months in advance. And then an athlete could decide, well, I can violate the contract that provides my livelihood and try to compete on a level playing field if they knew that something had a distinct advantage. But I think a lot of athletes aren't going to do that, and we could be looking at Olympic trials and Olympic marathon once again. Maybe we'll just have to cover the track events, but now you're saying it may go into spikes. But we don't want running to be about who has access to technology someone else doesn't have, and there's a lot of question marks now whether that's the case.
I do think, though, there's an opportunity here. I guess the other shoe companies could let the athletes wear them, but moving forward in terms of marketing the sport, I've always wanted, I have some really creative ideas. I need to be a consultant for all these professional sports leagues. First of all, to people who say it's not an advantage, I promise you, if you put Kipchoge in a regular pair of flats from 2005 and have him run London, he doesn't win that race this year.
Oh, you think so? That's what you think?
Yes.
This year? Of course. John, Kipchoge in a regular shoe versus anyone in the better shoe that's at least 1 or 2% better, he gets creamed.
Yeah, 2015 Berlin Marathon. We have evidence of this. He killed everyone in Berlin in 2015, and he was wearing a piece of floppy, cardboard shoes in that race.
Yeah, I've had a Pebble in my shoe too before.
John. He was actually in a prototype shoe there for that race. It's come out that shoe was a Nike Vaporfly prototype.
I don't care. You're saying that gave him an advantage? No.
It makes more sense it makes more sense, right? Why was the insole flapping out? They gave him prototype shoe. It wasn't made properly, and it made sense that the
You're ignoring my point. You're ignoring my point. You're trying to argue that shoe gave him an advantage.
No, we're not. We're saying...
No, but John, that field was pretty deep that year, pretty weak that year. It's not a London field. He's not racing the world's best at a shoe worse than everyone else.
Yeah, if we're talking 4% worse, John, yeah, when things are level, he's better than everybody else, significantly. But when he's 4%, he's not 4% better than them. That's point number one. But moving forward, how cool would it be? I've said they should have New York be rabbited 1 year and then no rabbits the next year. Or rabbited once every 4 years. Spice it up. But how about having London, old school London, once every 5 years, old school flats. Then let's see how fast they run. So we can run the Vaporflies 1 year, and then the next year you're not allowed to wear them. Now, hopefully somebody's still making the normal flats. That would be cool. Think outside the box. I love to see in the NBA where they would have, or I'd love to see college basketball have one game a year where there's no shot clock, no 3-pointers. Be cool. Have a tournament.
That'd be
great.
Horribly, horribly boring.
It wouldn't. It'd be fascinating. It'd be different. You'd watch it.
No, because it'd just be one team holding the ball once they go up 2-0. It'd be terrible. No, I do want to see Kipchoge. I would love to see him show up in an old pair of streaks and just wipe the floor with everyone in London, because I think unlike you, I don't think it's a foregone conclusion. I think he could still win.
Oh yeah, and Bekele just didn't drop a 201.41 because he was in some crazy shoe. He just went from being a 204, 203 guy to 201 just because he's getting older and hasn't run a healthy race in 2 years.
Well, I mean, he went to the Netherlands and he sorted his diet out. There's a lot more that goes into running a 201 marathon than just the shoes. But I'm saying, yes, the shoes were a factor. I'm saying Kipchoge's so good, he could still beat a lot of those guys without the shoes, and maybe all of them.
You don't think the shoes might help you at the very minimum 30 seconds in a marathon? 1 minute? That's not even close. 1 minute is less than 1% in a 2-hour race, John. Less than 1%. Now think about that. At the Olympic marathon trials, what if we just start everyone up and we shoot certain guys off and like, you guys start, everyone else, you got to stay here a minute. A minute is less than 1%. People would be outraged. And essentially, because of the shoes people have on their feet, that's what's going to happen at these trials.
Yeah, but in practice, are they always getting that benefit? I mean, Kipchoge doesn't make his move in some of these races until the last couple miles, and he still wins by like 30 seconds or whatever. So, I mean, he won by 18. All right, he won by 18 seconds in London last year. But like, could he have won by more if he just decides to run run as fast as he possibly can from the gun? I think he could. You know.
I just can't believe you don't believe that he was in a shoe that puts him at a minute disadvantage or minute and a half that he would beat everybody.
That's not what I'm saying. He has an advantage against, well, in the London Marathon this year, the top Nike athletes all had the next percent, so he didn't have an advantage there against the Nike athletes. But
all right, guys.
Yes, the shoe gives him an advantage, but I don't think that you can just say that's the only reason he's winning, and if he took him out, he wouldn't be winning anymore.
This is bigger than just Kipchoge, guys. It's important for the sport. To be continued. At this point, though, guys, it's on the shoe companies. If their athletes are complaining because they don't make the Olympic team, it's on them for holding them to an inferior pair of shoes. If you realize your equipment's not good enough, change the upper and hide it or paint over it and just don't talk about it. So we'll talk about this in the weeks to come. Enjoy the week. Enjoy USA's Houlihan versus Purrier.
Team Willie Fink, let's go!